The snow was merciless. The burning wreckage of a starfighter hissed and steamed as the icy winds of the north howled through the ancient woods beyond Winterfell. Jagged metal and blackened glass lay scattered like bones, the once sleek Jedi. Interceptor now a twisted skeleton half buried in the snow. Above, the sky churned with clouds like ash. No moons, no stars, just cold, crushing silence. And then a cough. A groan. From the heart of the wreckage, a figure pulled himself free, his cloak singed, his gauntlets cracked. The cold bit into his skin instantly, a shock unlike any planet he'd ever known. Not Hoth, not Ilum, not even Mygito could match this cold. His breath came in white puffs as he dragged himself out of the cockpit, blinking through frost and smoke. Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight war hero chosen one, was stranded. His comms were fried. The Navy computer kept spitting out corrupted star charts. R2-D2 was gone, launched off with the emergency eject module during re-entry. Anakin didn't even know what part of the galaxy he was in. This planet wasn't in the Jedi archives. He could feel it through the Force, wild, ancient, untouched by the Order of the Republic. And it reeked of something else, something darker, buried deep. As he stood to his feet, a sharp pain ran through his right leg. Broken, maybe fractured. Reached out with the Force to numb the pain, just enough to move. He had to. The cold would kill him faster than any Sith. Stumbling through the snow, he found a ridge overlooking a vast forest, and beyond it, a castle. Stark, grim, stone-grey walls surrounded a cluster of towers, smoke curling lazily from chimneys. It looked primitive but alive. Civilization. He began the slow trek. Atop the battlements of Winterfell, Jon Snow narrowed his eyes at the distant plume of smoke. It wasn't from a hearth or a smithy. This was black, angry, unnatural. He'd seen smoke like that after a wildfire explosion during the King's Landing siege, but they were in the north now. Nothing burned like that here, not without reason. What is it? Asked Arya, stepping beside him, her breath frosting in the air. Don't know yet, Jon said, but I'm going to find out. By the time Anakin reached the forest's edge, he was bleeding, frostbitten, and furious. The cold wouldn't let up, and the Force was no help here. It was like trying to move water through stone. Everything felt heavier, distant. He'd never been so too muffled, and that terrified him more than anything. Then came the sound of hooves. A group of men emerged from the trees, wrapped in furs and leather, swords drawn, eyes wary. They didn't look like clones, and they sure as hell didn't look like separatists. One of them raised a hand. Halt, who are you? Anakin straightened, eyes gleaming in the dim light. My name is Anakin Skywalker. I've crash-landed on your planet. I seek shelter. The men exchanged confused glances. Never heard of any Skywalker. You from Essos? Anakin frowned. Essos? No, I'm from Coruscant, Republic space. Now they looked at him like he was mad. One of them muttered something about a wildling lunatic. The leader stepped forward cautiously. You'd best come with us. Lord Stark will want to see you. Good, Anakin said coldly. Maybe he can tell me where the hell I am. As they rode through the snow toward Winterfell, Anakin tried to process everything. The Force here was sluggish, the tech was non-existent, and these people spoke a strange dialect of basic. But one thing was certain. They didn't know what the Jedi were, and that gave him an edge. But what he didn't know was this. He wasn't the first to fall from the stars, and he wouldn't be the last. The gates of Winterfell creaked open with a groan that echoed through the yard. Snow drifted from the rooftops as the horses came to a halt and the guards dismounted. Anakin, wrapped awkwardly in a borrowed fur cloak, stepped down slowly, his injured leg trembling beneath him. He hid the pain well. He'd learned to do that long ago, but it didn't escape Jon Snow's eyes as he watched from the stone steps. Jon stepped forward, his dark curls dusted with snow, his face as unreadable as the frozen godswood behind him. You're the one who fell from the sky. Anakin gave a slow nod. My ship was attacked. I lost control in orbit. I don't even know where this is. You're in the north, Jon said plainly. The kingdom of the north. This is Winterfell. I've never heard of it, Anakin muttered, glancing around. The architecture was crude, built for survival more than comfort. It was beautiful in a brutal way, like a warship made of stone. "And I've never heard of anyone falling from the sky," Jon replied, stepping closer. "Not in a ship, not like that." Anakin studied him carefully. He wasn't sure what to make of these people. No power signatures, no droids, no holonet transmissions. Just steel, fire, and flesh. Still, the man standing before him, this Jon, had something in his eyes. Leadership, battle scars, loss Anakin could relate. "You're lucky to be alive," Jon added. "The crash was visible for miles. My men found you near the Wolf's Wood." "I wasn't trying to land," Anakin said, pulling his cloak tighter. "Trust me." Jon nodded once and turned. "Come inside. We'll find you something warm. Then you'll tell us everything." Later in the Great Hall, as fire crackled in the hearth and food was laid out before him, Anakin recounted his story in half-truths. He told them he came from another realm, another world beyond the stars. He didn't mention the Jedi Order or the Clone Wars or the Sith. That knowledge, he felt, would only confuse them, or worse, make them fear him. But Arya wasn't so easily convinced. She leaned against a nearby pillar, her eyes sharp and curious. "You're not just a traveler," she said. "You carry yourself like someone who's killed. A lot." Anakin didn't look at her. "I was a soldier." "Still are," she muttered. Sansa sat silently, watching him with cautious interest. Bran, however, was something else entirely. The moment Anakin entered the hall, the boy, no, the creature that used to be Bran, had tilted his head slightly, as if he already knew who Anakin was. "I've seen many things in the Weirwood visions," Bran said flatly, "but never anything like you." Anakin narrowed his eyes. "You're not like the others." "No," Bran replied. "I'm not." The tension in the room thickened. Anakin didn't like being studied like some ancient relic. He especially didn't like being read. Before the silence became too suffocating, Davos Seaworth entered with news. "There's something strange near the crash site," he said. "A black box of some sort, covered in markings we've never seen. Glows when touched." Anakin's eyes lit up. "R2. R. What? Is it still there?" Anakin stood too fast, wincing as his leg flared with pain. Jon raised a hand. "You need rest. We'll send men back in the morning." "No," Anakin said, his voice ice. "I need that droid. He may have data about where I am and how to leave." "Shall I think someone's after you?" Arya asked. Anakin didn't answer, because he didn't know. That night he wandered to the Godswood alone. The snow fell slower here, muffled by the weirwood branches. The face carved into the ancient tree seemed to watch him, sad, judgmental. He stared back, and then he felt it, a ripple in the force, not strong, not sharp, but ancient, something. Sleeping beneath this land, something that had felt him arrive, something waking up. He pressed his hand against the tree bark. It was warm, too warm, and behind him, unseen, the shadows of the woods moved, slowly, quietly, watching, waiting. Morning came with a silver sky and a silence that pressed against Winterfell's walls. Snow blanketed everything, softening the clank of armor and the breath of horses as Jon Snow prepared the search party. Anakin stood at the gates, already armored in mismatched pieces of borrowed steel and leather, his lightsaber hidden beneath his cloak. Jon eyed him carefully. "You sure you're ready to ride? That leg still looks stiff?" "I've fought worse injuries in worse places," Anakin replied flatly. "Besides, that droid could be my only way off this world." Arya, already mounting her horse, smirked. "Or maybe you're running from something that followed you here." Anakin didn't answer. He just mounted up. They rode in tense silence through the woods, the crash site only a few miles off. The trees whispered in the wind, and the snow muffled the world, making every sound sharper, too sharp. Anakin's senses were on edge, his connection to the Force flickering like a weak signal. This world, it resisted him, like it didn't want to be read or touched. When they reached the site, the wreckage was half buried, blackened and steaming. Anakin dismounted quickly, pushing aside debris until he found the singed shape of R2-D2, slumped and motionless under a collapsed wing. He dropped to his knees, brushing snow off the droid's dome. R2, come on, buddy, wake up. The others kept their distance, watching as Anakin removed a small tool from his belt and began working under the dome. Sparks flew. The droid groaned once, then whirred to life, lights blinking erratically. Language, Anakin muttered at R2's first angry screech. Jon and Arya stepped closer, stunned by the machine. It blinked, buzzed, and chirped with intelligence and purpose. That thing. It's alive? Arya asked. He's a droid, Anakin said, not looking up. More useful than half your men and twice as loyal. Charming, Jon muttered. Anakin stood. SARS-2 projected a flickering hologram. Star charts, corrupted system maps, signals unreadable. Then came something else. A distortion. A ripple in space. A flash of red and black. And a shadowed figure with a red saber. Anakin's blood froze. No, he whispered. He followed me. Who? Jon asked. But before Anakin could answer, the trees erupted with sound. Howls. They weren't wolves. Shapes moved between the trunks, tall, pale, silent. Their eyes glowed faint, blue beneath ragged armor, and when the first of them stepped into view, Arya's face drained of color. White Walkers, she said. They haven't been seen this far south in years. Anakin ignited his saber with a snap hiss of blue light. The Jedi weapon burned hot against the cold air. Guess that changes today. The creatures lunged. The fight was chaos. Arya danced between them with deadly grace, her Valyrian dagger flashing like starlight. Jon swung Longclaw in wide arcs, each blow cleaving through rotting flesh and cracking frozen bone. But it was Anakin who turned the tide. His saber sang. The blade sliced through them with unnatural speed, searing through armor and bodies. The Force moved through him again, not clean, not pure, twisted by the cold magic of this world, but powerful enough. Every movement was violent, graceful, like a storm given form. R2 shocked one of the creatures that got too close, by the hue. Time it was over. A ring of shattered ice and twitching limbs surrounded the clearing. Anakin stood in the center, his chest heaving, saber still glowing. Arya stared at him, stunned. What? Are you? Anakin extinguished his saber. Someone who didn't come here alone. Back in Winterfell, Bran sat before the fire, his eyes clouded, his voice barely above a whisper. He's here. Now. Sansa looked up sharply. Who? Bran turned his head toward the window to the north where the snow fell thicker, the one that broke the stars, the one Skywalker left behind. In the darkness beyond the wall, something stirred. A figure walked slowly through the blizzard, his hood black, his saber crimson, dragging behind him like a leash. He followed the path left in the Force. He felt Anakin's presence like a heartbeat. Darth Sidious had sent him to kill the traitor. Now Darth Vader was rising again, one decision at a time. Winterfell's walls were tense with whispers. After the battle in the woods, the word had spread like wildfire. The stranger who fell from the sky wielded a blade of light that could cut through the White Walkers like fire through dry hay. Some called it magic. Others whispered he was a god in human skin. The Maester scribbled nervously in his books, muttering about heresy and prophecies. But Anakin didn't care about any of that. He stood alone in the Godswood, lightsaber in hand, eyes fixed on the frozen ground. The fight had awakened something inside him, something he'd buried after Mustafar. He wasn't the Jedi he once was. This world didn't just resist the Force, it tempted him with its raw power. The darkness here wasn't hidden, it wore no masks, it welcomed his anger. And for the first time since his fall, he didn't feel like he had to resist it. Footsteps crunched the snow behind him. It was Jon. I've fought many things, Skywalker, Jon said, but nothing like what you did yesterday. You've never fought a Sith, Anakin said. Is that what those things were? No, Anakin said, shaking his head. That was just this world's sickness. What's coming next, that's mine. Jon stepped beside him, his breath misting in the cold. You still haven't told me what followed you here. Anakin looked at him, his face unreadable. A mistake, a ghost I made real. Jon waited, silent. "I served something once," Anakin said quietly. "A man who promised to bring order. But all he brought was death. I betrayed everything I believed in. And someone else took my place. Someone who he finished what I started." Jon didn't press, he didn't need to. He saw the guilt in Anakin's eyes. It was the same guilt that haunted him every night since the Battle of the Bastards. The guilt of surviving when others didn't. "The red blade in that projection," Jon said. "He's coming? He won't stop until I'm dead," Anakin said. "Or until this world is ash." Deep beneath the wall, in ancient tunnels abandoned for centuries, Vader moved with unnatural grace. His armor was blackened with frost, his breath hissing with rage. The Force was different here, sluggish but still his to command. He reached out, seeking, and felt it. Skywalker. Alive. The betrayal burned fresh, even now. Sidious had tried to rebuild him after Mustafar, but Vader had seen the truth. Anakin's heart still beat. And that made him weak. So he had torn the weakness out piece by piece until there was only vengeance left. This time, he would finish it. He stepped through the gate, and the frozen wind howled like 1,000 dying souls. Back in Winterfell, Sansa and Arya argued. "You saw what he did us," Arya hissed. "He saved us." "He's dangerous," Sansa snapped. "We don't know what he is or what he's brought with him." Arya leaned in. "You sound just like Cersei." Sansa flinched but didn't back down. "I sound like someone trying to keep our people alive. What happens if this thing chasing him burns Winterfell to the ground?" Arya turned away, jaw clenched. "Then we fight." Sansa whispered, "We might not survive this one, Arya, magic blades or not." Bran summoned Anakin to the Godswood. The boy was pale, hollow-eyed, more crow than child now. He didn't speak with emotion, just certainty. "You brought more than war," Bran said. Anakin frowned. "I didn't choose to come here." "No," Bran said. "But you did choose to fall, and now your fall has echoed across time." Anakin stepped closer, voice low. "What do you know?" "I saw another world," Bran said. "Machines, towers of glass, wars in the stars. I saw your fire. I saw a mask." Anakin's hand gripped the saber tighter. Bran blinked slowly. "He's coming. And if you fight him here, Winterfell will burn." The next night, the first attack came. Not Vader, not White Walkers, something worse. Creatures twisted by both magics, raised from the dead by the Night King's touch, but driven by a new energy, dark and mechanical. Their eyes glowed red. Their bodies stank of rot and oil. Vader was building an army. As the gates of Winterfell slammed shut and horns rang across the snow, Anakin stood on the wall, staring into the storm. He'd fled across a galaxy to escape his past, but it had found him, and this time it wore his face. The dead screamed as they struck the walls, but these weren't the sluggish wights Jon Snow had fought beyond the wall. These moved with purpose. Precision, as if something or someone was coordinating their every step. Their limbs twitched with unnatural jerks, some of them covered in fragments of armor, unlike anything seen in Westeros. Rusted bits of metal, black plating, even what looked like pieces of burned-out droid limbs jammed into rotting torsos. The air reeked of burned flesh and fuel. From the ramparts, archers loosed arrows, but it barely slowed them. One creature took 3 bolts in the chest, then leapt 10 feet up the wall with a hiss. Arya was waiting for it. Her blade pierced its eye, and it dropped in a heap of tangled limbs. "They're learning," she spat, breath ragged. Anakin moved like a blur, his saber humming to life as he cut through a cluster of the mechanical. Undead. His movements were sharper now, no longer weighed down by confusion or diplomacy. This was war, and if he had to become a weapon again to end it, so be it. R2 rolled beside him, projecting small bursts of flame from his side compartment to hold off the ones crawling too close to the walls. Jon barked orders, Longclaw flashing under moonlight. "Keep them off the East Tower. If they breach it, we're done." But it was Bran who saw the real danger. He was connected now, part of the roots of the weirwood, part of something older. As the undead battered the walls, Bran's eyes went white, his consciousness diving deep beyond time and shadow. And in that place he saw him, A dark figure standing in a snowstorm of stars, cloak swirling, red saber glowing like a wound in reality. Darth Vader. He wasn't just coming to kill Anakin. He was here to replace him. In the sky. In a vision. Carved across centuries, Bran saw a terrible future. Vader seated upon a frozen iron throne, the North enslaved, the old gods silenced by technology and fear. The others bending to him, corrupted by the power he poured into them. If Anakin fell again, even just once, the entire world would belong to the darkness. Inside the Great Hall, Sansa met with the surviving lords of the North. Some wanted to flee. Others wanted to surrender. One, Lord Serwyn, suggested turning Anakin over to the enemy in hopes of buying peace. "He brought this war to us," Serwyn snapped. "Let the gods deal with him." Sansa's hand slammed on the table. "If we hand him over, we're already dead. Better to die with honor than become slaves to sorcery and machines." Before anyone else could speak, Anakin walked in, snow melting from his cloak, saber still hot. "Let me make this easy," he said coldly. "No one hands me over. Because if Vader gets his hands on me, he'll use me to power this war." They looked at him with a mix of awe and fear. Jon stood beside him. "We fight. Together." "And when the wall falls?" Sansa asked, eyes narrowing. "What then?" Anakin's jaw clenched. "Then we make our stand at the heart of Winterfell, where I can control the field." Sansa didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she saw it in his face. He was willing to die here. That night, as the dead pulled back into the woods, Jon and Anakin stood over the battlements staring at the retreating forms. "They're not falling back," Anakin muttered. "They're waiting." Jon nodded. "For him." Anakin looked out into the blackness. "He'll come, and when he does, he won't fight to win. He'll fight to prove I never should have left." "You sound like you know him." "I was him." Jon stared, then asked the question he'd avoided for days. "What are you, Anakin Skywalker?" There was a long silence. Anakin didn't look away from the dark forest. "I'm the mistake the galaxy never corrected." The night was quiet. Too quiet. Winterfell slept under a shroud of dread. The fires burning low. The people speaking in hushed voices, as though they feared their words might summon the enemy closer. Children clung to their mothers. Blacksmiths hammered in the dark, reforging broken weapons with trembling hands. And above them all, the stars had vanished, swallowed by a sky that no longer welcomed hope. In the Godswood, Anakin stood before the weirwood tree, his saber laid at its roots like an offering. The tree watched him. The carved face, twisted in sorrow, looked almost alive in the firelight. "I was supposed to bring balance," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. "Not this." He knelt. It wasn't prayer, it was resignation. The force moved around him, faint and strained in this land, but he still felt it. It whispered in ways he didn't understand. This world had its own magic. Older, wilder. It didn't care about light or dark. It demanded survival. Behind him, Bran rolled forward, silent as snowfall. His eyes were as cold as the roots below. "You're afraid," Bran said. Anakin didn't deny it. "I know what he is, because I made him." Bran tilted his head. "But you don't understand what you are." "Not yet." Anakin turned. "Enlighten me, seer." Bran's voice was calm. "This world doesn't need her Jedi. It doesn't need a Sith. It needs someone who's tasted both of them and chooses something different." "I'm not that man," Anakin said bitterly. "Not anymore. You could be." Anakin stared at the ground. He didn't want to hear hope in a child's voice. Not again. Not after Mustafar. Not after Padme. Not after... Footsteps approached. Arya. "They've been spotted," she said. "He's coming." The fields before Winterfell were empty now, quiet beneath the pale dawn. Snow blew sideways in harsh gusts. And then, through the storm, the sound of metal grinding. Darth Vader stepped from the woods. The storm parted for him. His saber hissed alive, red and savage. He did not speak. He did not roar. He simply walked toward Winterfell like a force of nature, inevitable and indifferent. Behind him the army followed, not just the dead, droids. Anakin stared in disbelief. Old separatist machines, rusted and scarred, reassembled with what looked like bones and black ice. He'd fought them for years in the Clone Wars. He destroyed them. Now they marched again side by side with the Night King's creations, a fusion of dark magic and twisted science. Vader had been busy. On the walls, Jon gave the order. Horns rang out. Archers took their positions. Arya vanished into the shadows. Waiting. Sansa watched from the tower, one hand gripping a dagger, the other clenched white. Anakin stepped to the front line. He wasn't ready. He would never be ready, but he stepped forward anyway. The battle began with fire. R2 triggered the new traps Anakin had helped them build. Improvised mines made from crashed starfighter parts and wildfire. Explosions tore through the first wave of undead, blowing limbs and circuits sky high. But they kept coming. They always kept coming. Droids fired from hidden positions, their blasters humming. Winterfell's archers returned fire with arrows dipped in dragonglass. Jon and the remaining knights charged in formation. Then came the breach. A hulking droid, half mechanical, half white, smashed through the gate. Anakin met it head-on, saber flashing. He moved like lightning, slicing clean through the machine's torso and kicking it back into the snow. More swarmed through. Arya appeared beside him, a blur of steel and blood. But none of it mattered when the sky darkened. Vader entered the yard. All noise seemed to vanish, even the screams. Anakin stood across from him, face lit by the glow of two sabers, blue and red. "You followed me to the end of the galaxy," Anakin said. Vader's voice rumbled, distorted. "No, I followed you to where you broke." They circled each other. "I left that behind." Vader raised his saber. "No, you buried it. Now I'm here to dig it up." Their blades clashed, a thunderous crash of light and fury. The Force rippled, stones cracked, the wind howled. Winterfell held its breath. Their blades danced like lightning made solid, blue fire against red fury. Every strike sent sparks into the snowy air, lighting up the courtyard like a storm. Winterfell had never seen anything like it. Not from dragons, not from fire, not even from war itself. This was something older, something cosmic. The crowd kept their distance, watching from the walls, too afraid to blink. Jon stood with Longclaw drawn, but even he knew. This wasn't a battle he could join. This was between two gods who once were men. Anakin struck low. Vader parried with inhuman strength. The ground shook beneath them. Anakin spun, tried to use the Force to shove Vader back, but it barely worked. The darkness around Vader swallowed his attempts like sand swallowing rain. "You feel it now," Vader growled, pressing forward. "This world, it wants you, just like I did." "I'm not you," Anakin spat. Vader slammed his saber against Anakin's, driving him to one knee. "Then why do you keep fighting like me?" Anakin roared and unleashed a flurry of strikes, driving Vader back step by step. But with every blow he felt something deep inside him cracking. Like the old armor he thought he'd shed was still clinging to him. This wasn't just a fight. This was a confession, a reckoning. Up on the walls, Bran's eyes rolled white. He saw the truth through the weirwood. He saw Anakin kneeling before the Emperor. He saw Padme gasping for air. He saw twin sons, fire, death, and finally, hope. Bran whispered to no one, "He still has a choice." Sansa leaned in. "Who does?" But Bran didn't answer. He was already somewhere else. Anakin tumbled backward, blood on his lip, snow melting beneath his overheated skin. Vader advanced, relentless, saber dragging through the earth like a blade too heavy for even gravity to lift. "You think they care about you?" Vader hissed. "These people? You're nothing to them, a monster with a glowing sword." Anakin stood, legs shaking. "Maybe, but I'd rather be their monster than yours." Vader raised a hand and hurled Anakin through a pillar of stone. It shattered on impact. Arya cried out and tried to move forward, but Jon stopped her. He has to face this alone. "Why?" she snapped. "Because he's not just fighting Vader," Jon said grimly. "He's fighting himself." The storm thickened, the sky groaned. Anakin lay broken in the snow, staring up at the grey clouds above. He heard voices. Not real ones. Obi-Wan's voice, "You were the chosen one." Padme's voice, "There's still good in you." And then, a whisper in a voice he didn't recognize, but it sounded like hope. He stood. The blue saber lit again, and this time, when Vader struck, Anakin didn't meet him with rage. He moved with clarity, calm, no anger, no hate, just purpose. The tide shifted. Vader's blows slowed. He became uncertain for the first time in decades. Anakin ducked, spun, disarmed him. The red saber clattered across the yard. He pointed his saber at Vader's throat. Breath hissed from the mask. Silence. Then Anakin deactivated the blade. "I'm not your shadow anymore." Vader looked up at him, frozen. "Then finish it." "No," Anakin said softly. "That's what you do." Vader was still for a long moment. Then he slowly stood and stepped back. His voice, once filled with rage, was hollow. "You've chosen their world," Anakin nodded, "because it still has a soul." Vader turned toward the darkness, the storm swirling around him. "I'll return," he warned. Anakin let him go. "Not if I'm here." The army faltered. Without Vader's presence, the connection between machine and magic unraveled. The undead collapsed. The droids froze, and the battlefield fell to silence once more. Winterfell still stood, barely, but it stood. Later that night, Anakin stood in the Godswood again, alone, until Jon approached. "You could have killed him." "I've killed." "Enough," Anakin replied. Jon studied him. "You think he'll come back?" Anakin nodded. "He always does." Jon looked out at the trees. "Then we'll be ready." Anakin smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone." "Friend or enemy?" Anakin turned to him. "Brother." Far beyond the wall, in the heart of a dead star, Vader knelt before a hologram of the Emperor. "I failed." Sidious's voice crackled. "Then you know what must be done." Vader said nothing, but inside, something had changed. Anakin Skywalker still lived, and that made him dangerous. Snow fell softly over Winterfell. Not like before, when it carried dread on the wind, but gently now like an old memory. The walls stood bruised but unbroken. Fires burned in the courtyards again. The smithies rang with steel not for war but for rebuilding. Winter had not passed, but for the first time in weeks, it had paused. Anakin stood atop the battlements, cloaked in furs, watching the horizon. His lightsaber hung from his belt, untouched since the duel. He wasn't a Jedi now, not a Sith either, just a man, scarred, uncertain, but whole. Arya joined him, quiet as always. She leaned against the stone, eyes forward. "You should have killed him," she said. "I know." "Then why didn't—" "You?" Anakin took a breath, his words slow. "Because if I did, I'd be him." Arya studied him. "Doesn't mean he won't try again. I'm counting on it." She nodded, not entirely satisfied. "You're not staying, are you?" "No," he said softly. "This isn't my war." "But it became your battlefield." Anakin smiled. "It always does." "In the Godswood." Bran waited, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything. When Anakin approached, the boy blinked slowly. "You've seen where I go next," Anakin said. Bran nodded. "There's a place far from here. A gate that doesn't belong. You weren't. Pulled to this world by accident. It was leaking. Cracks between stars. He followed you through it. But there's more coming. More. Others. From your galaxy. Lost. Forgotten. Some are worse than Vader. Some are like you." Anakin exhaled. "Then I need to find them. Before they find us." They sat in silence for a while. Bran finally added, "You'll be remembered here." Anakin shook his head. "No, you'll tell stories. I'll fade into myth, or monster, and that's fine." Bran smiled faintly. "Even monsters can save kingdoms." Jon rode with him to the edge of the forest, where the last piece of his broken ship had been dragged and repaired. R2 waited, beside it, beeping impatiently as the engines warmed. "You sure about this?" Jon asked. "I can't stay. I don't belong here. You helped save us." Anakin gave a half smile. Then I finally did one thing right. Jon extended his hand. If you ever return, I'll know where to find you. They shook, two warriors who had lived more lives than they could count. As Anakin climbed aboard, R2 chirped something that made him laugh. Yeah, I know. You were right all along. The ship lifted slowly, creaking through the gravity. The sky opened, the stars began to return. And then he was gone. Years passed. Winterfell rebuilt. The world turned. Children were born who knew nothing of droids or glowing sabers. But in the heart of the old Godswood, people still told the story of a man who fell from the stars, a man with fire in his hands and sadness in his eyes. Some said he was a demon, others a hero. Only the ravens knew the truth, and they never told. Far away, in another world entirely, a man in red and black armor stepped through a rift. His face was lined with hate, his saber burned white-hot with vengeance, but standing in his way was Anakin Skywalker, waiting, alive and ready.